But what I want to do now is head right into the difficult territory of politics in the workplace. And I've been speaking on this subject for, well, nearly 12 years now. And the reactions that we get to the dirty tricks and the politics are there on the screen for you to see. And they're very real reactions, very real things that people say to me. And quite often, and this is a good thing actually, quite often these reactions are from people with high levels of integrity. So I'm pleased working with these sort of people, but also they're people who have got generally a high level of technical expertise in their role, in their job. They're really good at what they do. And so it's almost like a statement of frustration that all of these things seem to be going on around them. And they've got no part in their technical delivery, their competence. What have they got to do? Why do they have to get involved in all of these things? And I think it's a really good thing in many respects that is coming through with them, and they're starting to see that. But that doesn't make it any more comfortable. It doesn't make it any more realistic they have to step into these arenas. And people do have to step into the arena of politics. But I want to be clear about what politics is, because it's a dirty word and a lot of it is just, has so much emotional baggage around it. But for me, politics is any act in order to influence. Influence is the sort of like the end product and people doing things differently. And politics are the behaviours that people use to actually make those things happen. So when somebody says to me, well, is there any such thing as an organisation with no politics? The simple answer is no, because it's all about influence. And if people are behaving in order to gain influence, then there are political acts taking place. And I'm going to continue to sort of develop on this theme, and then I really want to hear your questions as well, so that we can start to make sense of this, because a lot of it is about an emotional reaction. So the human element, when people are acting in such a way to get what they want, a lot of it, and this is where it gets the bad press and where it gets the negative connotations and experiences, is for their self-serving agenda. They're trying to feather their own nest, advance their own cause. And it's not so much whether there are politics going on around you, it's the degree to which they are harmful or helpful, positive or negative. And in all of the work that I've done, I think the real charge for the negative politics and why it is so bad is because of the harm that it causes and the degree of self-interest that is being perpetrated by those people or pushed forward by people who are playing the negative politics. And I want to try to help you to sort of differentiate between the two. So a lot of this is about the intent that people are putting into their behaviours, their attempts to influence their politics, and it's all about those politics. But when these things are going on, and you may have had experiences in the past where you've been on the receiving end of a political move by somebody, it hits you emotionally. There is an emotional reaction, and I don't care how experienced you are, when somebody is playing a trick on you or making a move to try and take advantage of the situation and you're right in it, there is a little bit of an emotion or a big amount of emotion that is potentially going to get in and cloud your judgment and your reaction. And so one of the key ways of sort of starting to handle some of the negative politics is to objectify it, is to make it a little bit more clinical so that you can look at specifically what is actually going on. And I'll show you later on how you can get a lot more into that. But the other thing another thing there that is, I think, really important is there is a lot of unknowns here. I mean, I put out a post earlier on today about what is the fuel behind negative politics. And to a large extent, it's confusion and ambiguity and not really knowing what is going on or what people are trying to do. And in those sort of situations, what do people do? They start guessing. They say, well, so-and-so is trying to do this, that or the other. And that becomes a problem if it's inaccurate. And quite often it is. And sometimes, particularly when you're having an emotional reaction to a strategy that somebody is putting forward or unfolding, when there's that emotion sort of potentially clouding your judgment, fantasy can take over, or paranoia can take over, and it's very easy to assume things to be far worse than they actually are. One of the consequences of that is that then starts to create a vicious cycle within the psychology. What is going on inside your mind and your self-talk, and you're starting to potentially blow things out of proportion or misconstrue things. You might not be, of course, and you've got to be open and wise to that possibility. But there is a lot of that sort of going on. And whenever there is negative politics going on, or even politics, you've got to try to step aside from the emotions. That doesn't mean to say leave the emotions out of it, because in your response to some of the things that are going on, you can actually come back and respond in a very emotional way. What I like to think of is, clinically, objectively assess the situation and then choose what emotions you start to use in order to counter it. But the point is, and this is where I really want to get to on this particular part, is that positive or negative, politics is about people's attempts to influence, and within your arena, and specifically within individual groups, people are vying for attention. They are vying for influence. They're competing for influence to get their ideas to be taken forward, to be supported by the majority of people within that group. They've got their different agendas and different objectives and different goals that they want to push forward, and particularly in large complex organizations, there's so many different agendas that are running, professional, let alone personal, that you need to start to get hold of and understand, because without that understanding, how can you ever actually find the right thing to do or the best thing to do? Otherwise, you're just shooting in the dark, as I think I've said before. So a couple of other things that I want to do, and then we'll start to move towards the questions, is on this slide, we've got looking more towards the positive side of things. And one of my favourite characters to quote in this is good old Aristotle. And rhetoric or rhetoric, depending on where you are in the world. And the point here is that Aristotle is recognized as the greatest teacher ever on rhetoric or rhetoric, yet he hated the subject. The reason why he hated the subject was because he felt that rhetoric, which is argumentation and the structure of persuasion, he felt that that gave power to weaker arguments, and he didn't like that. He felt that that was wrong, that people who were duplicitous or had poor ideas were able to put a load of skill to it and then get their way. And so he became a teacher of rhetoric so that he could equip his students of high integrity with the skills to be able to defend their good ideas and their wholesome ideas, and thus he was able to advance the state and the good of the state in ancient Greece. And so I think that's a really important thing, an analogy to really use, that the same is true of politics, and politics with a small p in the workplace, the art of influence, the art of getting things done and getting other people to agree with you. You've got to understand what's going on there. If you don't understand how other people are doing it, you're going to be, sort of working with one hand tied behind your back, or maybe even both hands tied behind your back, or maybe even a bag over your head as well, depending on how extreme it is in your situation. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to accept it as a given that political activity is going to be going on around you, and your number one priority must be to understand what's actually going on, which is where the second part of this session will help you. The other thing is that, there's been a lot of research on politics and the skills of general management and how you can get on. And I like to sort of refer back to Harvard Business Review, who did some research a long time ago now, sort of 15 years ago, where they were looking at what it takes to be an elite CEO candidate versus a good candidate. And what they found was that there were 5 key dimensions of behavioural skills that were, or competencies that were required, and number one was, or one of them was political capability. And what they noticed is between the good and the elite, the good candidate really understood how the politics were working, could interact with it, and actually manage the politics around their role and their purpose and what it was that they were doing. However, the elite, what made them different in this particular dimension was that they could do all of that, but they also had a reputation for playing it straight. So they weren't naive, they weren't sort of blinkered or altruistic, thinking that everything was rosy. They were really wise. They could spot what was going on. They could see what other people were doing. They could interact with it, but people trusted them. There was a lot of high degree of integrity there, and that's what they rated as being, you know, one of the most important qualities of an elite CEO candidate. So that's sort of really trying to put the case across for positive politics. And really what I'm saying here, and I'm going to bring Rocky in with some questions in just a second, is that number one, open your eyes to the activity that is going on within a particular group that you're working with, so that you can understand the moves that people are making, the sort of things that they're doing in order to advance their agenda. Because once you've understood it, you can then make choices about what you do for the best, and you are then making choices in an informed way, in an intelligent way, rather than guessing or going with your heart. And you can put a lot of heart into it once you've made your decisions, but the point that I'm really trying to impress upon you is get to understand what's really happening around your role or in the group where you wish to be successful, and then you can use your appropriate level of ethics and integrity to be quite incisive and quite determined in actually making sure that you can work those politics so that they don't disrupt your purpose, your cause, and your vision and what you're trying to do, but B, you can harness the potential power and the potential influence that can be gained from getting that side of things right.